treating them as citizens. And now a word to Dr. Michael Biden's visit. And we have Lewis Head, who's here with us as well. Dr. Biden's testimony will be limited to the purview of the grand jury, and we won't get into the substance of his testimony. We do not feel that is appropriate. The only thing that Dr. Biden had wished to express to Michael Brown's parents is that in his preliminary autopsy, he had not been able to determine the shots to the chest, whether they were re-entry wounds or entry wounds. He was able to confirm, along with review of some of the materials from the medical examiner's office, that there was an additional entry wound into his chest. It was not a re-entry wound. And to that end, that would be the only thing that we get into to the substance of his testimony, because that is going to be for the grand jury's consideration. And he thought it appropriate, as well as Attorney Gray, that that goes to them and them alone. And I'm sure subsequently, after the decision is made, you will hear about all the substance of his opinion. Again, good morning. I would like to thank everyone for showing up, along with Attorney Gray and Attorney Parks and I, on behalf of Michael Brown's family. We are grateful for your presence here this morning. The journey for justice for Michael Brown Jr. has been long, stressful, and difficult to endure. The family sincerely desires to thank those that have supported their call for justice for Michael Brown. As far as Dr. Biden's visit today, the family, Attorney Gray and myself are very grateful and appreciative that he took the opportunity to fly to St. Louis at a moment's notice and provide forensic testimony to the grand jury. Apparently, members of the grand jury desire to hear his forensic perspective. We're also appreciative of the fact that the prosecutor's office opened the invitation for Dr. Biden's testimony. We do not know what extent his testimony will be necessary or what subject matters will be covered. We are simply hopeful that whatever it is, it would offer some insightful analysis and independent analysis for the grand jury that they can use in reaching their decision. As most of you well know, Dr. Biden is a world-renowned forensic pathologist. His forensic talents are unquestionable. Therefore, we have every reason to believe that his testimony will be very helpful to this grand jury. I thank you. We'll take a few questions and then we'll move on.
Does Dr. Biden's analysis and your investigation of the evidence, what is there that suggests that Michael Brown was surrendering when he was killed?
Well, he's talked about that before, and as I said, Ron, he would prefer that the substance of his testimony not be discussed. That
in regards to the grand jury testimony,
he would talk about that himself, and we would defer to him to talk about that, respectfully out of his request.
Is it your contention still, regardless of Dr. Biden's testimony or anything, that there is evidence that shows Michael Brown that shows
Michael Brown had his hands up?
There's no doubt about that.
There's no doubt about that. And that is not in regards to his testimony. That is in regards to what we know based on our review of all the opinions, his and others.
And forensic evidence as well.
Yes, absolutely, forensic evidence. And Dr. Biden is basing his testimony on science and nothing more.
Attorney Crump, does Dr. Biden, did he have everything that he needed to, was there anything that he wanted to look over that he didn't have, or? there anything that does he have all the...
Well, Jonathan, he's going to respond to that. He asked for a list of things, and whether those things were supplied to him or not, we're going to defer to Dr. Michael Bowden to comment on that as well, on everything and anything regarding the substance of his testimony out of his request.
Can you talk to us in general terms, because as I understand it from the first autopsy that we saw in August from him, I got the impression from reading in the autopsy and from talking to you guys that the biggest point that he made is that there was some distance, that it wasn't up close. And that seems to be the biggest difference between what the county is saying and what your medical examiner is saying. Do I have that right?
Well, we understand again that these are all very good questions, but Dr. Bowden, substance of his testimony is going to be discussed by him after the grand jury. He believes, as Attorney Gray and I also agree, that the substance of his testimony should be left to the purview of the grand jury. And so, in respecting the process, we won't be able to comment on that this morning. Dr. Bowden may be able to talk to you all about that after the decision.
Are you getting a better sense on the timing of this today? Have you guys gotten a better sense on timing?
I believe that it appears by Dr. Bowden's appearance today that we're probably getting to the end of the witness list. We don't know for sure, however, but it just, we gain a sense that we're probably reaching the end of the road as it relates to witnesses.
Can I ask you both, I'm Sarah from CNN, can I ask you both about the secrecy of this grand jury? Is there any worry on your part that telling people that he's going to be testifying today lets some of that secrecy out and lets people know, sort of what's going on inside of the grand jury?
Well, Sarah, I've been on record. I've always believed, as Michael Brown family has believed, that we should not have this grand jury, that the police officer should have been charged. There was enough probable cause to charge Officer Darren Wilson with killing unarmed Michael Brown, and that with such mistrust in the Ferguson community, that it being transparent based on the Constitution of the United States of America, that we have a right to trial by jury, that Michael Brown's due process warranted that the officer be charged. And that was not to violate the police officer's due process. Nobody's saying he's guilty until proven innocent, but we thought it would be better for everybody here that they saw all the evidence, all the witnesses, and that there was cross-examination of all the evidence and all the witnesses. So whatever decision that was handed down, people would accept. There's a great concern that because of this secret proceeding, that people will not be so accepting of whatever decision the grand jury makes. And we need to, as I said in my earlier comments, after you have questionable outcomes with law enforcement, we need transparency, so people can believe that the system works equally for everybody, even in communities like Ferguson.
What's your thoughts on McCullough has said that if there is no indictment, that he's going to release the evidence, and that is rare, he says, to be transparent. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought about that is this. We may get the benefit of hearing and seeing all of the evidence that was presented to the grand jury, but what we're missing would be how that information was presented. What emphasis was placed on what piece of evidence? What were the inflections in the voices and those kind of things that we will not have the benefit of actually seeing once all the information is out, especially if it's in transcript form. You're only going to get the words and not how those words were conveyed, which in terms of presenting evidence is very key in having persuasive power.
Can you shed some light on what prompted the grand jury to request Dr. Bowden's presence? Can you shed some light on what prompted the grand jury to request his presence?
I'm sorry. Let me get here.
I don't know that.
Hold on. Saying that he disagrees.
Well, again, Sarah, respectfully, and we'll have to refer to him to the substance of his testimony. I think he's commented on your question before already in a number of newspaper articles about that. So
Can you just tell us what he's saying now? I mean,
no, I can't, because I don't want to violate.
Jury, but is he still sticking with
his testimony that he answered that question a week ago, as well as I think the other pathologist who said she was misquoted and so forth. So we will leave that to the doctors to comment on that.
Can you confirm whether it was something that Dr. Bodden found that prompted him to want to revisit this, or whether the grand jury had a question and specifically requested him because of something they were unsure about? How did this all come together? Is that something you can shed some light on?
Apparently the members of the grand jury wanted to hear from him, and we're thankful that the prosecutor's office extended the invitation to satisfy that request.
Have you been told why he was asked to testify this late in the process? He offered to testify weeks ago. Again,
we have no control over the process. You know, the family is at the mercy of this office. You know, the prosecutor's office. They are praying that they will give Michael Brown Jr. due process of the law as every American citizen, and that they can get justice, that it works equally for them too.
Has there been any credibility at this point? It sounds like this process has no credibility in your eyes.
Well,
right
we've questioned, Ryan, as you know, from the beginning, this whole process. Again, we've been on the record. We think there's enough probable cause that exists to charge the police officer with killing an unarmed teenager, and we've been consistent on that. In that way, everybody will get their due process. The constitutional rights will be extended both to the police officer, but also to Michael Brown Jr.
But if it's so evident, why don't you believe the grand jury will also come to that conclusion?
Well, here's the problem. When you have a grand jury, they only have one voice in there, and that is, historically, they're going to do whatever the prosecutor wants them to do. As Attorney Gray so eloquently said, if he presents the evidence in a certain way, there will be an indictment. If he presents the evidence in another way, there will be no indictment. It is all about what evidence he presents and how he presents it. That has always been the history of grand jury proceedings. We think that this process is one that warrants transparency, not a secret proceeding. And so we're on record as saying that there's enough probable cause to arrest them and have the constitutional amendments play out as they have been meant to play out for every citizen. As if you were charged with a crime, you would come before a jury of your peers, and the evidence would be vetted, and everybody have a right to cross-examine it. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, because we keep saying that we want Michael Brown Jr. to get his due process.
The wound, is that a 7th wound or is that a 6th wound to his body?